I'm Lizanne Flynn. I'm a master healer who holds space for any earthling as they reunite body and soul. I am a bridge for relationships between all species so that the heart bond becomes stronger, deeper, and more loving. I serve in the roles of animal communicator, medium, and medical intuitive, and I use the tools of shamanic journeying and soul retrieval to support all earthlings in their recovery from past trauma. I'm certified as a canine massage therapist and Reiki master teacher. This is the Animals iView podcast. What I was hearing in my head when coming up with the title for this podcast was a riff on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which you are more than free to try out on your own, either under your breath or out loud. You do be you. Mine was Dinosaurs in the Sky, No Bird Brains. John Lennon's song was not about LSD, as popular wisdom at the time had it. Rather, it was based on his son Julian's drawing of his schoolmate Lucy with stars behind her. When asked what the picture was about, the title of the song was born. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was what young Julian told his father. So, from one creative brain to another, the elder Lennon's imagination took flight, and we were gifted the dreamy and ethereal Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And since the universe / the animals came up with the title of the podcast, perhaps they'd prefer we follow their lead and move away from our historic denigration of bird in general and maybe get just a bit afraid of them. Sure, who among us has not come across a family of geese in the late spring with goslings in tow and faced the righteous wrath of a good-sized wingspan and snake-like hissing should we deign to even share the path with the Kinshin schema or uber cuteness factor of the young geese? I'm hearing from a human perspective, our feelings are easily hurt when we receive a fierce defensive reaction from goose because we think to ourselves, silly goose, can't you tell I mean you no harm? Didn't I even say that out loud? I'm a good person and wouldn't dream of hurting you or your darling family. To which geese would reply, as in sticking out their tongue at you and blowing a raspberry, meaning, how quickly we forget that we are predator and they are prey, and our species is currently holding the rest of the planet hostage with our actions based on greed. And by the way, in case you've wondered, geese and goose cannot be compared with one being more correct than the other, as these are the two terms we use for the same waterfowls. For sure, it's one goose, a flock of geese. It could also be, looky, I see a geesey goose or a goosey geese. You get the picture, and I found that if I can see any interaction with an animal from their perspective, I am much less sensitive about how they might react when we're both in close proximity and they have their offspring with them. If you were to switch that picture up and imagine they were pterodactyl, or a more modern name, pterosaur, which is literally winged lizard, how quickly you would find the roles of predator and prey changing place while you're out on a walk around the local lake with young Susie or Brian and the stroller, whose Kinshin schema of large eyes, wobbly head, and small body would probably not save them from being a quick snack, yourself included, for a pterosaur, which is spelled with the silent P like in pterodactyl. As early as 1600, we have denigrated the general species of bird, starting with a human being bird-witted or flighty and lacking capacity for prolonged attention, then bird-brained, whose synonyms include cuckoo, goose, scatterbrain, ditz, fool, silly, nitwit, flibberty-gibbet, featherhead, featherbrain, simpleton, softhead, and rattlebrain. If we move away from perhaps the lighthearted cuckoo, as in being bird-brained, we find ourselves in the territory of bird-brained meaning the same as moron, and I won't tell you about the 3 times as long of a list of synonyms. And maybe it was our raising chickens initially in an agricultural society that caused us to adopt the overall perspective that bird was not very bright. Quoting from the Charlotte's Web author E.B. White, who wrote The Hen, in parentheses, An Appreciation in 1944, a common charge made against the hen is that she is a silly creature. It is a false charge. A hen is an alarmist, but she is not silly. She has a strong sense of disaster, but many of her fears seem to be well founded. You may be aware of recent research that's come about in the last 10 years or so, and probably with the rise of humans once again sharing their lives with chicken, that their intelligence is quite remarkable. Quoting from the article in the podcast notes, according to a 2017 meta analysis published in the peer reviewed journal Animal Cognition, chickens can make inferences, do basic math, and are highly emotionally intelligent. As it goes with most of our relationships with other species on Earth, our perspective is molded by what we're told about them, while our direct experience with them can either cause significant cognitive dissonance for us or shatter those preconceived molds outright. And it's not just chicken either. I know I've mentioned in the past being enthralled with bird in general, and certainly from an animal communication standpoint, and having a couple of feeders outside my back door that Mr. and Ms. House Wren visit regularly and on occasion, a red-breasted nuthatch and others. I've got the Merlin Bird ID app on my phone, as well as another app that identifies for me the species of the particular calls that I might be hearing, which is always such a kick to do a 15 to 20-second recording and find out that it's made up of between 4 to 6 different species. So even though I can't see them, I can hear them. And for me, that makes all the difference. I've also mentioned that in the Facebook birding group, of which I'm a member, there are broad perceptions of definite villainous bird species, chief among them being starling. I'd add rufous hummingbird to the list, as well as grackle. These three, among others, are usually because of their behavior and what we perceive, or rather project onto, are traits that we don't care for, which are usually about their being territorial and loud. We feel sorry for the ruby-throated or the broad-tailed hummingbird when rufous ones come to the feeder, as we think they're bullying the first two. We perceive starling to be an invasive species, which they are, and we don't care for grackle, either the song or the fact that they're omnivorous, and won't hesitate to take for food a much smaller barn swallow that swoops by. And in fact, while we might initially be enthralled with the outer plumage of any species of bird, thinking them quite pretty, that does not alter the fact that some of them will absolutely take over the nest of another species and destroy the carefully placed eggs of the nest builder. The species who do that are cowbirds, cuckoos, and indigo birds. Some species of birds will also, due to their omnivorous nature, eat the young of other birds, as well as practice what's called obligate siblicide, where the stronger of a pair of chicks kills the weaker one due to their parents laying what's called an insurance egg at a later date, sort of a spare to the heir kind of thing. There's also facultative siblicide that occurs when there is more fighting in the nest among the chicks, and for species like osprey, where chicks remain in the nest longer than, say, ducklings do, which is interesting, and it is of note, I think, because osprey themselves are identified as predators. An example of this might be the case of the blue-footed booby. A sibling might be hit by a nestmate only once a day for a couple of weeks and then attacked at random, leading to its death. More birds are facultatively siblicidal than obligatory siblicidal. This is perhaps because siblicide takes a great amount of energy and is not always advantageous. Another example from an article by the New York Times talks about penguins and how the younger and weaker chick is often mercilessly attacked and dispatched, with the parents in close enough proximity to intervene and who did not. Perhaps this contrast aspect of bird isn't something with which we're familiar, and we'd much rather focus on, ooh, the pretty colors, and look how fast they are, or look how strong they are. Eagle, we're talking about you now, or other birds as totems we like, such as hawk, which all y'all know how I feel about animal totems in general. The fact is, we actively live with other descendants of dinosaur who actually look their part, like alligator, crocodile, turtle, tortoise, etc., that may be acknowledging how species we once deemed to be bird-brained and not very smart, according to the size of their brains, about a walnut in chicken, are the dreaded DD, the dinosaur descendants, as well. And if they have current behaviors that we would consider to be survival based and then some, well, what's to stop them from turning their survival based beady eyes toward humans? Again, we're masters at deflecting away from our predatory behaviors because our species is also focused on our survival alone, as much as we say pretty words about our feeble attempts to preserve other species alongside ours. And if we're comparing intellectual capability, we do not have to look much further than the family of corvid that includes crow, raven, and magpie. Maybe there's a reason we call a group of crow a murder of crows because of their ability to recognize those humans who have been kind to them and those who have not. Talk about your bedtime stories. This information is passed down from generation to generation. So can you imagine Mama and Papa Crow reading to their latest flock? Then Mr. Smith did a bad thing and threw stones at your uncle because Mr. Smith thought he was making too much noise. Little did he know that Mrs. Smith was leaving corn and other food out for our family, so we left buttons and shiny things for Mrs. Smith to use in her voodoo doll of Mr. Smith. I'm just kidding, sort of. While bird today is warm-blooded, perhaps there is some of that cold-bloodedness that we demonize in other animals and other humans that remains as part of their overall DNA structure. Evolution is, after all, about survival of the fittest for all species, including ours. Yet somewhere along the line, we got way off track in sacrificing other species for our survival, so that we ended up being out of balance with other species whose numbers are, for better or worse, managed by evolution. And for those who may doubt that your parakeet companion is a dinosaur, we have this offering from science. If birds aren't dinosaurs, then we have no idea what they are. Birds share so many features with theropods, and there are no other candidate fossil groups. When you understand that birds are a type of dinosaur, that the evidence is stacked up, everything starts to make more sense. Birds inherit their bipedalism from theropods, explaining why they evolved flight using just their forelimbs, unlike bats or pterosaurs. If that hypothesis was wrong, we'd expect to be just as uncertain about bird origins as 30 years ago. And like most things on Earth, if you wait a bit for that cognitive dissonance to subside while resonance takes its place, you may find a deeper appreciation for the dinosaurs in the sky who sing the song of their people at O Dark Hundred to wake you up. It helps to send a thought, hopefully a nice one, to the resident miniature dinosaur just outside your window. All animals keep track of our relationships with them, from your companion animals to the animals in the wild, including those in whose veins run the blood of pterodactyl. Keeping it neighborly and neutral seems the best way to go, and at least that's how the animals see it. Thanks for listening today. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. I offer all new clients a free 15-minute consultation. To schedule online, go to LizanneFlynn.com. Come find me on social media, Facebook, Twitterverse, Instagram, and LinkedIn. I encourage you to sign up for my quarterly newsletter on my website, where I also post notices for upcoming events, the starting date of courses in the Animals iView Academy, and online psychic fairs. The episodes of this podcast are available on my YouTube channel, complete with subtitles. You'll find that link in my podcast footer, and be sure to subscribe. This has been the Animals iView podcast. I'll see you next time.